we are looking at wealth distribution relative to the world. And in steps 1 and 2, get to know your data and get curious, here's what I investigated. I was curious about, what you can see here is that the green bars are the United Kingdom and the blue bars are the world. And they have different shapes. The United Kingdom has this sort of camel hump and the world has this slide. And it took me a little bit of time before I understood that these numbers were equal when you add them to 100%. So they are parts of a whole. And this type of chart, a bar chart and a grouped bar chart, is not typically used to show parts of a whole, but as I began to explore other ideas for how to visualize this, I began to understand why the creators did this, because this is a hard one. There's not really a perfect way to show this type of information. And the other thing I noticed is that these buckets of wealth are not equal. The first one is 0 to 10,000. And if you were going to have an equal bucket next, it would be 10 to 20, then 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and so on. What you're looking at is actually a logarithmic scale. So the first one is 0 to 10, then it goes to 10 to 100,000, and then 100,000 to a million, and then a million to, a bajillion, trillion, gazillion. However far into, wealth money piles you can get. And those are just vastly different. So that's something I explored in some of step 3, my idea party. But before I got into that distribution and the buckets or the sizes of each category and what that means in actual wealth, I really just looked at a more traditional way to show parts of a whole. So I started with a pie chart. And, I labeled these from $1 sign to $4 signs, meaning, bucket number 1 and bucket number 4 and the 2 in between. And I just eyeballed what these percentages would look like on a pie chart. And, the cool thing about this view is that you instantly, if you highlight the lowest 2 buckets in each, the UK and the world, there's a very stark difference and contrast between the two. The UK's lowest $0 to $10,000 bucket is much smaller than when you compare it to the world. I decided to just try a different chart form that is similarly effective at showing parts of a whole, and this is called a waffle chart. Basically, it's a grid. It's nice to use either, 100 in a square or 25 in a square, because then you can get to those percentage numbers fairly easily. And it's, nice even look. And, same thing, looking at that percentage of small, lower income, lower wealth category to UK to the world, and they look vastly different. The cool part about a waffle chart is that you could replace these circles with other shapes. And one that you might consider is a person, because all of the data that we're talking about is about humans and how many humans fall into, what percentage of humans fall into each bucket. I moved on from the parts over time, and I wanted to sort out or separate out that idea of these shapes of distributions. And, like I mentioned, and I traced over the actual chart when I was in steps 1 and 2, I just separated these out to show the camel hump shape of the UK compared to the slide shape of the world. And that was interesting, but I really wanted to dive in more to this logarithmic scale. And the first thing I did was roughly eyeball this logarithmic scale from the first bucket being 0 to $10,000, and then multiplying that by 10 to show 10 to 100,000, and then multiplying this size by 10 to show 10 to 100,000 to a million. And I did a little math, because this dotted line is just 1 million and beyond. But I wanted to know if this, which is about 20 centimeters on my iPad, if I calculated from 1 million to 1 billion, how much further away would this line go? And I'm not even sure I believe this in my head, but according to my math, and I double checked with my partner, it's 200 meters from this 1 million to a billion. 200 meters. It's always shocking to me, the difference between a million to a billion. And I love how hard it is to comprehend scale, and I wanted to capture that in this visual form. So I played around with another visual of the difference in wealth by imagining these as stacks of bills piled up on each other. And, this is 1 million, so if you can imagine how big and spacious a billion would take up, but we only really have these 4 categories, so it would be like 1 million plus infinity. You could go on forever. And I ended up moving on, and in my further explorations, when I moved into step 4, evaluate and iterate, I tried to combine these 2 concepts, the distribution or percentage breakdown of these different wealth buckets and what the wealth buckets actually meant. And I had a really hard time with it. I tried 100 different versions and I didn't love any of them, but this is the one I spent the most time on. And I can imagine if you choose to attempt to make over this chart, it's going to be an awesome, exciting challenge, because I think it is very interesting and challenging in order to convey the concept of wealth distribution in a simple and clear way. And I hope you have fun with it.